Today I'm joined by Vic Wild. Vic is double Olympic champion in snowboarding. Welcome, Vic.
Yeah. Hey, Christian. Yeah. Good to be here.
Cool. Vic, you did what Shaun White attempted in the 2014 Olympic Games, basically winning two events in snowboarding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess so. Our sports are so much different, even though it's still snowboarding. It's quite. I don't really ever kind of compare the two, to be honest.
Are you still the only one who has two Olympic titles in snowboarding in one Olympic game?
Yeah, I think so. I would assume so. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
How did you get into snowboarding?
Oh, I was 7 years old, and our family was looking for a new activity to do, and I lived in like the near Mount Hood in Oregon, and we thought it would be fun if we all got into skiing. So we went and skied one day, and after that, the family, everybody except me, wanted to snowboard. So I was forced to switch to the snowboard, but I didn't really complain. So yeah.
Cool. For those of us who don't understand snowboarding good enough, can you give us a rough outline of the different events at the Olympic Games?
Yeah, so the events that I do are like the racing events or alpine events. It's quite a lot different than a typical day on a snowboard for most people. We have extremely stiff, hard equipment that's meant for going like quite fast and turning really sharp, I guess. Whereas, a normal snowboard is very soft. It's meant to go both ways, both directions down the slope. The boots are much softer, the bindings, everything is just softer for a normal snowboard. So the events in the Olympics, we have border cross, which is like motocross, but on snowboard. You have the alpine events. So now we only have parallel giant slalom. So that's two athletes competing head to head on let's say, for example, a blue course and a red course. And the gates are spaced around 25 meters approximately, and you race down that course. And now it's only a one heat race, so it's whoever wins, whoever gets to the bottom first. Then you have half pipe, which is pretty simple. You have a ditch that you build into the snow, and people jump off from the sides. It's actually a very cool event. It's maybe my personal favorite to watch. Then you have slope style, which is like just a bunch of jumps and rails, things like that. I think a lot of people really like that, but it's not my favorite. And then there's also big air, which again I find quite boring.
I looked at some footage and it's actually quite cool. And I would imagine it's a combination of physical abilities, but as much skill as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say, generally speaking, the best athlete does not win. It's usually someone who's balanced with, if you can be a good athlete, but you have to have really good equipment and then really good skills. So it's kind of, in a sense, there's the mental side, which is, your skills. There's, physical, obviously, and then there's equipment. And equipment in our sport makes a surprisingly big difference. It's very important.
Yeah. In your athletic life, what was your darkest moment?
So, yeah, I guess I would have two. I broke my ankle pretty bad when I first joined the U.S. snowboard team, and it put me out for about 2 years. I did a couple surgeries. I'd done 2 surgeries on it, and the second surgery didn't go well. The doctor in Utah that I was seeing was a really good guy, but he was like, he's like, hey, we got to fuse your ankle. He's like, you shouldn't be snowboarding anymore, and that was tough. So I ended up, through a couple other doctors, I got hooked up with this guy in Houston, Texas, who was working with Yao Ming at the time. His name was Dr. Clanton. But anyways, mentally it was tough, and it was I was very lost. I was 20 years old. I was no interest other than snowboarding. I couldn't do any sports, which is the only thing that I knew how to do. I had no interest in life outside of physical activity. So for me, it was really hard to accept that, okay, I can hardly even walk. I couldn't even really walk for a long time. It was terrible, man. I definitely probably don't want to get into everything, but yeah, I just felt very lost because I had nothing that interested me in life anymore. So it was like, what am I even doing here? It was tough, but fortunately, I went down to Texas to see this guy, and through a long process, he ended up doing a surgery on the ankle, and he fixed it pretty well, and saved my snowboard career in many ways. I think he probably saved my life too. So I owe him a lot. But that was physically, that was the most challenging thing I ever dealt with. So.
And you said that at the age of 20, so that must have been around the Torino Olympic Games?
Yeah, that was 2000. I feel like it was 2007. And I didn't get fixed. I didn't get that thing right until 2009. I didn't start snowboarding again until December 2009. So yeah, it was brutal. I wasn't going to go to the Olympics in Torino. I wasn't good enough for sure. I wasn't ready. But I will say, yeah, when I came back after, I tried to snowboard on it the first year when it was still broken, but no one knew it was broken. That's a long story. And it was tough. It was tough. But I was pretty crazy, man. I was a stupid kid. I just went for it. And then I skipped the next season afterwards. So 2000, man, I don't even remember all the years back then, but it was brutal, man. That's all I can say. It was brutal. And I'm happy that it worked out.
What was the second moment?
So the other one I was going to say wasn't the physical moment, but it was the Russian doping scandal. And man, that's much more recent, much closer in the mind. I was crazy, I was, imagine my story and coming from the United States, winning those 2 gold medals, living this craziest thing that I could ever imagine. And then one day opening up the email, and I have this strange email from the New York Times. And they said, right in it, you and your wife were taking steroids at the Olympics. And what do you have to say about it? We're gonna do this big article on it. You're gonna be in it no matter what you say, if you don't speak or if you do. So you should defend yourself. That's what they said. And I had a full anxiety attack. It was crazy, man. It was crazy. I called everybody I knew who could try to help me to see if they were. I assumed that they were telling the truth, and I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. How could I possibly be okay? If I knew I was taking steroids, I wouldn't have been surprised. I'd be like, oh shit, okay. But I didn't think I was taking steroids, that's for sure. So I was like, what could be going on here? And everybody in the Russian Federation explained to me, they were like, you don't have any problems. We don't understand why they would email you. And I went all the way to basically the number 2 guy in the Russian sports, had a meeting with him with my wife that day. And he told me straight up, he's like, there is some shit going on, but you and your wife have nothing to do with it. And, he couldn't really tell me anything more than that. So I just tried to accept it. And, a couple of days later, the New York Times article came out, had nothing to do with my wife and I, which was kind of the first sign that oh, maybe they were just looking for someone to talk on it. Right.
Getting some
but still
information.
nothing ever, like they wanted somebody to, because no Russian athlete's going to talk to him, but maybe this American guy will. So they think. But anyways, for the next 2.5 years, I would, the whole thing was going on, and I was like, okay, like this is bad. Like what the hell is really going on here? So I would contacted the IOC. Next 2.5 years were brutal, and let's see here. I was always just waiting. Like, okay, I assumed at that point I started like. I don't think you can really take steroids without you knowing it. So I was, like, okay, like as things got further along and I understood what was going on here more, I was like, okay, you can't accidentally take those types of drugs. Like you have to know what you're doing. I'm worried about the urine samples being tainted. Obviously it sucks too. All sponsors that we're working with us were like, well, we don't want to work with Russian athletes anymore. So that financially hurt a ton. Friends, people that I snowboard with all look at me and everybody else in my team like we're cheaters. And I'm like sitting there like, dude, you wish I was cheating, but I just kicked your ass. Like it's fuck whatever. That sucked. But then a lot of Americans, everybody looked at me like for example, when I came back to America, went to my little hometown, everybody was so excited for me. And now there's always this connection to steroids or to doping or to whatever, from those Olympics. It's like, man, like, just guilty by association. There were 33 athletes or something, I think 33, that have been guilty of taking drugs at the Olympics. So they say. I'm not one of them, but why do I have to live with this guilt or this, this kind of everybody looks at me and is like, oh yeah, but he was a Russian athlete. He's probably, he's not a real Olympic champion. And that for sure took me, I think, a long time to let it go and to not maybe to start detaching myself from the Olympics and from my Olympic medals. I think when I won those Olympics, I was very naive. And those Olympic medals meant so much to me when it happened. And over time, I've had to learn that, like, you know what? Like, that was cool. That happened. I'll never take it away, but they're not a part of me. That Olympic champion thing is just one piece of a much bigger life and much more amazing experiences that are going to come. So just kind of separate it from myself and move on. And I feel like I did that, but it probably took me, it took me till probably a year ago, 2 years ago to really let it go.
Okay. Yeah, that leads almost well into the next question. What happened at the 2018 Olympic Games? You were defending Olympic champion.
So, I wasn't riding very well. My wife was riding really, really well. She was one of the best coming into the Olympics. Considering the situation, I made a lot of mistakes heading into it, equipment wise, unfortunately, that I can't take back. But I ended up 10th, and unfortunately, my wife ended up 4th, which is tough, especially in my sport, because you race directly for 3rd for the bronze medal. But being at the Olympics in 2018 was not the same thing as being at the Olympics in 2014. I think maybe February 2nd, the IOC said that I could go to the Olympics. And I think we left February 7th, February 9th, something like that, to fly. So, I assumed I wasn't going just because Victor On, the skater, wasn't allowed to compete. So I assumed that they would put me in the same tier as him. But I think basically at the end of the day, they just couldn't find anything on me. There was just literally nothing, not even a person to say, maybe. So they were like kind of forced to let my wife and I compete, which was awesome. And I'm happy I was able to go and at least, have a chance to defend it, even though it didn't work out very well. But.
Yeah. And the uncertainty of not going? Did that
Yeah.
also affect the preparation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what, sorry. Yeah, it sucked. So the uncertainty of not going, I think, maybe I'm a pretty anxious person as it is, because I'm like obsessive, very obsessive with information. So I can plan myself, days in advance, weeks in advance, knowing exactly how I'm going to snowboard, where I'm going to snowboard, the hotel I'm going to stay at. Everything is everything needs. I need to have all the information before I do anything, so I can change my routine weeks before, right? So with the Olympics hanging over, and I'm like, okay, so how are we going to set this up, or how are we going to set up training in Korea? What days should we fly? But I don't even know if I'm going. And I think that just for life sucked. Life sucked. But there's no excuse. I'm not saying that had I had all the right information, had I had, I think things would be different had all of that not happened, but it did happen. And I think that there's not really an excuse, that there's no need for an excuse. It's just life, right? There's a lot of things that went right my way in Sochi, of why I ended up with 2 gold medals and not 1. So, or not 0. So you kind of have to sometimes take it as it is. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
So
what was your best moment?
My favorite moment, well, obviously it goes to Sochi when it comes to snowboarding. And one thing that I'll never forget is the first race. So we had the PGS, and we had some funky weather coming into it. And when we woke up in the morning, we went up to the mountain, to see the course. We were late. Actually, we missed our bus, so we showed up late. But we got there and it was solid ice. It was so icy, you could for sure put on ice skates and skate on the slope. It was so icy. I'd never seen anything like it. And I love the ice. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is going to be an interesting day. And because I was like, okay, I like the ice, but I've never ridden something like this before. And, it was crazy. Everybody was so scared. Nobody could ride on it. And I had a good day. It was really, I was super nervous, obviously. It was my first Olympics. I couldn't believe it that I was there. The race started. I qualified second. It was me and another Russian guy qualified really well. He went out first round. He lost in the first round. Back then we have 2 runs. So you take 1 run on the blue course and 1 run on the red course against the same person. And there's a differential. So let's say I win the first run by half a second. Well, my gate's going to open a half a second earlier in the second run, which makes it really fun. And so it's a 10-run day. I qualified second. First, it was, every round was, to be honest, not to be arrogant, it's the truth, it was super easy. I was so far ahead of everybody the first 2 rounds. I was like, wow, like, what's going on? Like, how can I be riding so much faster? But I had a little secret, and I'll explain more on that later. But basically, I got to the big final, and it was me and this Swiss kid who I'd grown up riding with. I'd known him since I was probably 15 years old. And both of us were just couldn't believe it. And it was crazy. The second round, he had the advantage. He rode on the faster course in the first run, and I made a mistake. So he had a half-second advantage on me, basically, going into the second run. And I knew I would probably win because I had the better course. So I was just like trying to stay calm and like take it easy in the challenging parts, and then let it go when it got easy. And it worked out perfectly. And I wanted to say, like, why it was the best moment is when I crossed the finish line. I went around the last turn and I knew that it was over. I knew I had won, and like had this crazy experience where it was just like everything in my entire life that I had perceived to be like negative, like bad things that had happened to me, growing up, or, with everything, anything, like girlfriend that didn't like me or whatever. I was like, it's all okay. It was all kind of worth it because I finally am here, and look what just happened. And I crossed the finish line. I won, and man, I just couldn't believe it. It was so crazy. Such an amazing feeling that, I could have dedicated, I was 27 at the time. I had dedicated 20 years, most of my life towards snowboarding. I mean, I was a freak, man. I was crazy. I didn't have many friends. I didn't have any life outside of snowboarding. It's such a silly thing, right? It's just snowboarding. How can you take it so seriously? But I did, for whatever reason, and it led me to that moment of like wow, finally achieved like something that I only dreamed about when I was just a little kid in elementary school, and snowboarding had been put into the Olympics. And I would joke, or I'd tell my friends that I'm going to go to the Olympics someday, but I don't remember saying that I'm going to win an Olympic gold medal very often. I didn't, even as a kid, I didn't really say that. I just said that I would go. And so for all of that to have happened on that first day was just, I think there's few times in someone's life where they'll ever have that type of experience, so.
I believe that. That leads into the next question. If you could travel back in time 10, 15, 20 years, what advice would you give a younger Vic?
Oh, man. So I would advise him to learn how to invest money, learn multiple foreign languages, whatever languages you're interested in. And maybe don't be so hard on yourself. I think those three things would maybe be the easiest, quickest things that I would love to have told myself before.
Yeah. You kind of touched on that just now, but there's a video out there on YouTube where you're 11 years old and it says you're the next Olympic hopeful, and you already said you wanted to go to the Olympic Games. When did that thought of going to the Olympic Games come to your head the first time?
I'm pretty sure. Well, the first time that I can remember, I was in elementary school, and a kid named Eric Lund, funny that I remember his name, came up to me and he was like, "Hey, did you hear they put snowboarding in the Olympics for Nagano?" He didn't say for Nagano, but they put snowboarding in the Olympics. And I was like, so excited. Like, what? No way. I'm going to go to the Olympics. That was it. I mean, I was just in elementary school. It's just like, I think I'd probably only been snowboarding for a year or two at that point. I was young. I think I was probably in second grade. So I was probably 7 or 8. So I mean, if I was in second grade, I had just started snowboarding. So yeah, that would have been the first time. Yeah.
What are the habits that make you a successful athlete in person?
Well, and it's this is kind of tough. The habits that make me successful in snowboarding don't necessarily translate outside of snowboarding. But I think some people have this like ability to be extremely obsessive over certain things, and snowboarding for me became something that I was very obsessed with. And so I didn't need motivation. If it was raining out, it doesn't matter. I go train. If whatever happens, it doesn't matter. I go train, because it's like, I don't need to motivate myself. So I think that what made me successful in my earlier years of snowboarding was the ability to obsess, and the ability to just lock in, to put the blinders on, and to only care about that one focus. It's like a mission. But I've had to try to change that as I've gotten a little older, because it can't be the only thing in my life. So discipline is the next thing. To be disciplined, to sometimes not snowboard, to sometimes, do the things like like, clean the house, like do the things that you don't want to do and do it. Like, even if you don't want to do it, that's why you got to do it, in a sense.
Yeah.
So something like that. Maybe it's kind of tough to explain, but
yeah. No, I guess I understand. There is something that piqued my interest. On Wikipedia, it says, to some officials you were, and I'm quoting here, I might butcher it a bit. It says, to some officials you were an enfant terrible who didn't understand Alpine's snowboarding power structure. What did they mean? But what do they mean by that?
Well, I mean, the reason I left the U.S. snowboard, the USSA, which is technically a nonprofit, it has nothing to do with the United States. But it's funny that they get to take the name of the United States Ski and Snowboard Association and say, well, what do you actually have to do with that? I mean, all you're doing is taking rich people's money and spending it on buildings. You're not really doing anything. You're not developing any American athletes. You're just basically taking from them. You're letting, I can get into that, but I think what they were explaining with that is that I wouldn't accept, a situation where I knew that I would fail. And so I was, extremely, dedicated, and I wanted other people around me to be just as dedicated. And if they weren't as dedicated to me, then I'd be a dickhead, I'd fight somebody. I'd fucking threaten people. I was a psycho, man. I was crazy, but it's like I grew up in maybe a little bit different way, like pretty violent, like just the way that I grew up was more violent. It was normal to get in fights. It's just the way that I was kind of raised, is to not take, like, if people were disrespectful to me, then I wouldn't hurt anybody with words, but I would try to hurt them physically if I could. Which always wasn't, I mean, obviously that wasn't the best way to do things, but it was my way, and if someone closed the door, like in the USSA, it was always a financial door would close, and I would just break the door down. And I didn't care if I wasn't there to make friends with these people. My job is to win. Their job is to make me win. So what's the problem? So, with the USSA, it's always so funny when you hear stuff like that. And I see the way that they treat athletes to this day. The USSA, they want everybody to fall in line. What? So we can not be successful. So, I can get a top 30 on a World Cup and be proud of myself. And my family can pay for me to have this kind of fantasy lifestyle. No. Like, so, the USA, if they say I don't get it, no, I do get it. I know how to win. I know how to compete. I'm a machine compared to those people. They're soft. They're kind of like, they're like cockroaches, man. They're just taken from everybody, not having a great salary. All the people that run that, they make a ton of money while all these kids are struggling to survive. And I think it's just pathetic. So.
You have a morning routine?
No, not really. I drink coffee in the morning. No, not really. I drink coffee, hang out, have a small breakfast, and then depends on what the plan is for the day. But I do like being alone in the morning and hanging out just by myself for a little while. I think that might be my routine.
Yeah, cool. How do you prepare yourself for important moments?
I would say that, I try to have everything that I can control taken care of, way ahead of time, maybe a month or two beforehand, as early as possible. And then I don't have to think about anything anymore, and I can start kind of putting the blinders on, and start, getting the external stuff away, focusing more on the internal, maybe visualizing, as we get closer and closer to the events, visualizing what I want to do, making myself feel powerful, strong, whatever, confident. And then finally we get to the event to where, I'm pretty much shut off from anything outside. just, just me, just myself. I don't really talk to anybody. I don't really look at anybody. It's just me.
Yeah.
And
You just mentioned making yourself feel powerful and confident. How do you do that?
yeah. Well, I mean, I visualize myself winning, visualize myself in the past and the things that I have won before. I, I talk to myself. I, tell myself that, I tell myself, that, nobody can beat me, or, like that, I mean, that you're the best. And, I remind myself that I have probably put more or just as much. I don't, it'd be hard for anybody to put more into what we're doing, and more, like nobody can put more into this sport than I have. So I try to remind myself that, like, I have put everything in there. I do deserve, I deserve it just as much as anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's actually an interesting, thing is, so much of the time, I think a lot of athletes know that they haven't put it in. They haven't put in the hours. They haven't put in the effort to win. And when they get to that moment when it's time to go, they know in the back of their head that they don't deserve it. And that will, hold them back just that little bit, just that tiny little bit. And I think it happens to a lot of athletes.
Yeah.
So.
And if we go back to what we said earlier, do you feel like you have put equally as much into the preparation to 2014 to 2018?
No, I put a lot into my wife for those two. We had our own private team. The coach was for her. No, I put most of it into her for sure, because I wanted her to have. She deserved it. She'd given me a lot to go to those first Olympics and to do what we did. She sacrificed a ton for me. I mean, really a ton. And I felt like it was my turn to sacrifice a bit for her. And I wouldn't change that. It was the right thing to do. But I still would have changed a couple of little things that I could have done for myself to make it easier. But hindsight's always 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I watched some footage of the Olympic final in 2014 and you were up there in the gate, I thought you were looking pretty cool and relaxed. How do you prepare for that? Because, within 25-ish seconds, everything's over, but you have to, it's either make or break. How do you prepare for that?
I don't, it's hard to prepare for that. Like when I'm in that situation, I think fortunately you're locked in, man. You're in, like, if it's the truth, like if you need to win, it's not something that you want, it's a need. It's like air. You're just so locked in that, any fear or, I was in that situation. I was so locked in, I couldn't even think what it would be like to win. I could only think about, okay, where am I exactly right now? What do I need to do to give myself the highest percentage of chance to win this event? And, but it can't always be like that, because it has to be I call it the truth. Like it has to be real. It can't be faked. And I can't always, to be honest, I don't always want to win so much that I'm not going to allow myself the fantasy of what would it be like to win today, or to think ahead 5 minutes in time, or to think back 5 minutes in time. Sometimes I'm not so disciplined. I can't always be a machine. Like that is I think it'll only happen a couple times. Maybe hopefully a couple more times in my snowboarding career, but it's something that I can't necessarily predict. I think it just when I truly believe it, that I need something, that I want it, I really have a high chance of getting it. And then the mind, like everything can kind of, zoom in on it. focus in on that exact thing. And you, because I think we all know what we need to do, but sometimes we don't allow ourselves to find that state of mind. For sure, that's more of a conversation for a sports psychologist, but it's a crazy feeling when you get locked in like that, and where, I mean, you believe in that time like you're not a human anymore. You're something different. You're more like, yeah, man, you're like I don't know, but you're not a normal person. You're something else. And I would say this, it's really, really cool to be able to find that state and to feel like a god, for example. And then to do whatever it is that you got to do, and then to step out of it and become a normal person again. That you look around everybody as your peer, right? But for that moment in time, for that 1 minute, that 25 seconds, no, you're not. You're something different. And I feel like that's I think it's, a lot of people don't want to admit it, but it's a really cool feeling. But certainly something where afterwards, when you step out, you're like, okay, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to think like that all the time. But for that short period of time, it was like a really cool experience. And yeah.
And what would be the steps to take to give you the best chances to get that feeling?
I think that's a mystery for everybody. I think that everybody in all sports is kind of always looking for the secret to finding your flow state, as they call it, the zone. I mean, I think, whenever in life, whenever we prepare like to the maximal amount, and we get to, whether it's a test, whether it's a meeting at work, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's anything, if you come prepared and in the back of your head that you've done basically everything that you could rationally think of to be the best, then I think it's much easier to find freedom, and knowing that there's nothing more I can do, and kind of let yourself into the situation and let yourself accept whatever is going to happen. And, I never believed when I got to those Olympics, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to win this race. No, had nothing to do with that. It was like, okay, I think I've done literally just about everything I can do to succeed today. Let's see if I succeed. There's always bad luck that can happen, but I have more pieces to the puzzle than anybody else. So I have a higher chance of winning this race than anybody else. So I can just accept that life is going to happen, and let's ride, let's go. And I would say that is probably your best chance. So is being prepared and just believing.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying? It's yeah. I think there's so much you could talk about on that subject, but I don't know.
Yeah, it comes back to what you said earlier, right? You want to be prepared. You want to know what's going to happen so you can prepare for all eventualities. Yeah. So I think it does make sense.
Yeah. I've always, when I talk to, younger kids or, any athlete that I'm trying to help, like if I'm mentoring or just talking with them, I try to explain to them that, like, you don't have to be the best at anything. You don't need to be the best athlete. You don't need to be able to squat 200 kilos. You don't need to be able, you have what you are today, and let's find where you're weakest at. And let's, add a little bit of that to that. And so you have more and more pieces, more and more tools in your toolbox, and you'll never be guaranteed to win. Like kids get so bummed out when they're like, man, I'm not good enough, or, whatever. It's like, well, just keep adding tools to your toolbox, and eventually things are going to go your way. Like it will happen. Like it's just, you have to let it happen, and you have to continue to just grind away at your weaknesses and grind away at the things that you're not very good at, and be patient. And yeah.
How do you overcome setbacks?
Yeah. depends, you know, if it's like, you know, if it's short term, you know, like, for example, let's say, you know, let's go back to we're talking about the Olympics and the Olympics in Sochi. In the slaloms, the second event we did, I fell. I lost in the first run against this guy who I've never beaten in my entire life. He's beaten me every single time I've raced. His name is Benjamin Carl. He's won. I think he's like a 4-time world champion. He's pretty good. And I fell in the first run against him, so I lost. I was down by maximum penalty. And I got to the bottom and I kind of let myself go for a second. And I was like, man, I can't beat this fucking guy, man. Like, he always fucking beats me. Like, I don't understand it. It's crazy. And my buddy, he's also kind of my coach, he was like, hey man, like, dude, you won the qualifier by like a second. You're only down by a second, 1.12. You can beat this guy. Like, if you have a good run, you're probably gonna beat him. Like, I think you can beat him by a second. And you know, so I flipped it. I flipped everything right that second, and I was like, no. Like, okay, so this is a big setback. It's gonna be really hard to win. But how do I now give myself the best possible chance to win? And let's just be logical, rational thought, no emotions. You know, I got to the top and I talked to my head coach. We were in Russia, and I said, hey, make sure they clean my course. Make sure my course is as clean as possible. And if that means that he doesn't get anybody cleaning his course, that's his fucking problem. Because that's how it works in our sport. You know, like, if I do a race in Austria, there won't be anybody cleaning my course if I'm racing an Austrian guy. Everybody will be shoveling out the other guy's course. So I was like, make sure it happens. Do it. Get it done. Do what you got to do. So we get to the top, and there's probably 35. Yeah, there's about 30 gates in the course. I'd say we've got 25 guys working on my course, and we've got 5 working on Ben's course. That's what we need. And you know, but that's just logical and rational thought. Like, I'm here to win. What am I going to do? Like, I'm going to give myself the best chance to win. And if I say this, make sure that this is understood. I'm going to control the situation the best I can within the rules. I did that, and I ended up beating him by 300ths of a second. You know, literally, it was, you know, I reached my hand out like this. The timer hit my hand here, and his hand was only here. You know, it was that close. And but so that's how I handle short-term setbacks. Long-term setbacks, you know, like big things. You know, sometimes I struggle. You know, with sometimes I struggle with that stuff. I'm certainly not a perfect person. I was, you know, I did knee surgery right after the Olympics in 2018 because I tore my patellar tendon in the summer. But I didn't want to get surgery because I knew how the recovery was going to be pretty brutal, and I probably wouldn't be able to compete in the Olympics if I got surgery. So I did the surgery right after the Olympics, and dude, I was so bummed out, just so depressed, and like, oh man, I didn't handle that setback very well. So, you know, I certainly have to grow in some areas, and that would be one is learning how to handle setbacks outside of snowboarding and you know, in regular life, I guess.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Who's your role model and why?
Role models. Well, I mean, to be honest, when I was a little kid, I loved Mike Tyson. He was just crazy. He was amazing boxer, and just I think a really misunderstood person. But then him and LeBron James, man, I really, you know, I don't necessarily like how LeBron James communicates or a lot of his, you know, political stuff necessarily, but I like the fact that he has the ability that he's, I like that he can just say what he wants. I love it. Respect. But what I want to say why he's my role model actually is the amount of pressure that he's been under since he was probably 15, 16 years old, and he's never messed up, and everything he's ever done has been like beyond expectations. And I just think it's so incredible how he can be such a consistent human being, to just always be, among the best. I think it's, stability is a nice thing to have in life. And it certainly seems like he has that.
Yeah. For those of us who don't understand snowboarding's in and out, why is Shaun White so big considered to other snowboarders?
Well, I mean, he made the most popular event, even 100 times more popular with the half pipe. I mean, he kind of revolutionized it in many ways. He was so much better than anyone else. Also, he grew up in a period where half pipe was really growing, and he was able to, I mean, with the X Games in the United States, he was able to get a ton of media through that, I guess. But he's just an incredible snowboarder. I mean, the guy has been basically just better than anybody for the last 15 years, in half pipe. So it doesn't hurt that he's also a really good skateboarder, so, but I don't know all the reasons why he's so popular. I don't know what people like so much about him.
What is the best advice you received and who gave it to you?
One thing I really, really, really thought was cool is when the Celtics won the NBA championship and Kevin Garnett yelled out, "Anything is possible." That to me was a really cool moment when that happened. And I do actually remember that and think about it sometimes, hey, actually, in many ways, what he's saying is true, Yeah. So anything is possible. Pretty good one.
Yeah. You alluded to it earlier. You decided to change nationalities. Tell us about that.
Yeah, okay. So I snowboarded for the US for quite a while, and the funding was brutal. I mean, it was really bad. I had to basically pay for myself to snowboard. And it's not just paying for myself. You have an entire team. Like I have masseuse, I have 2 coaches, I have a tech. All those people travel around with me on the Russian team, right? You can imagine how expensive that is to have all of those people with you at all times. So in the US, I was just a one-man guy at the end of it. And I would travel with the Japanese team, but I would do everything. I would do all my work on my boards. I would take care of all my travel, all the travel stuff, all the organization. And it was, I just got to the end of that season and I had a couple decent results. I think it was 10th place at World Championships, which was, considering my situation, pretty good actually. And I think I was 8th. I had an 8th place on World Cup, which wasn't too bad. So I had some decent. No, I think I was actually 6th place in World Cup. Sorry, but they didn't want to offer me any funding, and I knew that I wasn't going to make it in snowboarding. I knew that, unfortunately, I just wasn't going to be good enough to manage the circumstances. So I retired. I told the USC that I'm done, so they don't need to think about funding me anything for next year. I think it was $5,000 that I was looking at getting, and I knew that maybe it wasn't over because at the end of the season, before I'd done that, my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, mentioned kind of as a joke that, hey, I should snowboard for Russia. And I was like, haha, if you could make that happen, I would probably do it. Just so you know, I would do it. Basically, I mean, a couple other things happened, but next thing I knew, she was having a meeting with the president of the Snowboard Federation, Ski Snowboard Federation, and they told her, okay, we'll talk to the big guys, in the Ministry of Sport, and we'll see if we can get this guy a passport. So a couple weeks later, the president of the Ski Federation gets back to Alina, and she says they would do it if you guys got married. And so she told me that, and we were like, hey, we're why not? Let's give this thing a chance. Like, let's go for it. We're already dating. We like each other a lot. Let's go for it. Let's, worst case scenario, well, I'm sure things could have gone pretty bad, but let's just go for it. So yeah, we did like a super quick wedding in Siberia, where she's from. It's crazy. And yeah, we did it. We went for it. We full on got married, and I had to wait 1 year to get my passport, and got a call. Geez, like 3 a.m. one morning, and they were like, "Your passport's ready. You need to come to Moscow ASAP." So I was on a plane, not that day, but the next day I was on a plane and I picked up my passport. Couldn't believe it. I was like, "Oh shit, this is real." And I started training with the team. Basically, like a week or two later, we went for it. So it, yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, it was kind of crazy to do it, but I just felt like, if I didn't try one more time, that I would always regret that I never had the support to kind of make it work for me. And it was probably, certainly one of the best decisions I ever made. So
Yeah. And you also mentioned that if you would not have made that and you would have stayed in the US, you would probably not be having the success you had.
Yeah, let's be real, I mean, not everybody is extremely skilled in everything. I have my one thing that I was really good at that time. And for me to find something else that I could be special in was unlikely. I mean, it's unlikely that anyone is going to be special at something in the first place. It's kind of the definition of being special. So I certainly wanted to exhaust all avenues before I quit snowboarding. So yeah, I mean, a lot of, it's another interesting thing. My dad, the guy who raised me, he was, a Native American guy. And he was very much not like interested in kind of the typical American settle down, have a girlfriend, have kids, get married, blah, blah, blah type of situation. He was very much like, man, you should be free, live, go experience the world. Like, don't lock yourself down. Like he kind of, I think without having him raise me and kind of like raise me to think on my own and to be a free spirit, I wouldn't have the balls to pack up and go to Russia, And even with all that, dude, it was so hard, man. Living in Russia the first 2 years were really tough for me. It was a challenge, but I was on a mission, so I didn't really care, how much my life sucked. I was there for a purpose, and only after the Olympics in 2014 was I able to kind of let my guard down a little bit and start learning how to enjoy life, learning how to enjoy the things that I've done. So
how was it received in the US Snowboarding Association?
I don't know. I don't think they couldn't really talk about it. I think they would probably, I don't know. I at that time, I really didn't look or think or talk to any of those people, so I don't know what they thought. I think that there were a lot of people there that really liked me because they saw how, like, man, this kid just doesn't quit. Like, he just keeps going. He just always shows up, man. He's always here. Like, why doesn't this kid just go away? So I think a lot of them actually, when I finally succeeded, they were like, oh shit, damn, he made it. Like, whoa. Like, I think that they were all pretty surprised. I know all my old friends and teammates that I snowboarded with there were all really excited. They all thought it was pretty cool. So I think the majority of it was positive. I think, yeah, everything I saw was positive. So
how does a typical training day look like?
So, all right. So like when we're on snow, we wake up pretty early, super early. So especially this last month, get up at 6, 2 boiled eggs, cup of coffee, head to the mountain, train for like 2-3 hours, come back, and it's pretty hard. Like you're pretty beat down. Come back, eat lunch, and then I do like a kettlebell. Like I train mostly just the 16 kilo kettlebell when I'm on the road. I have basically just these circuits that I run through, and I have then a bunch of core stuff with no kettlebell, obviously. A lot of like isometric core stuff that I run through, a little bit of mobility, and then stretch. So it's actually a long day. I think my workouts are about 2 hours, but it's all recovery. It's all just trying to get the muscles to work better, because like snowboarding beats me down pretty bad. Like when you're done, like it's such an asymmetric sport that it just, you know, you're constantly trying to bring your body back to like a neutral state. So, and trying not to get back injuries, which is pretty brutal too. So it's a lot of work. And then in the summertime, you know, I probably don't need to train so much, but I really like it. And I do like, I don't know, I do a bit of weightlifting, depending on types of issues or what, you know, I guess what stage of training I'm doing. I ride the bike quite a bit. I do some sprints, you know, I do some yoga. I stretch a ton. I really stretch a lot. Probably too much, but you know, a lot of people say, I know stretching is not necessarily super good for athletes, but for me, I'm so tight all the time that if I don't stretch for 30 minutes a day, I'm just asking for an injury. I'll pull a muscle in my back, my neck, things like that. So yeah, I don't know. I do everything basically on my own too. I don't really have a coach. So it gets a bit much. I'd say I overtrain quite a lot. But whatever, it's fun.
Bonus question. Do you want to nominate someone to be interviewed?
Man, I wonder who would be a good interview. There's a really interesting guy in America, actually. His name is Jonathan Cheever. He went to the Olympics in 2018. He hasn't won any Olympic medals or anything, but he has a pretty interesting story, I think. And he's definitely a different perspective than a guy like me. I think he'd be an interesting guy to talk to.
Cool. What's going on in the life of Vic Wild at this moment in time?
Well, we're preparing. We have a World Cup. So our first World Cup, we have like a tour of like maybe 12, 15 events a year. World Cup tour. But our first event is next Saturday. So we are in Italy and waiting for the ski areas to open back up because they closed down with all this snow. So we'll start training in a couple of days, and then we have our first 2 events. So that is pretty much everything that's going on in my life. So
going towards the 2022 Olympics?
I plan on doing those, but I am more interested in winning some World Cups along the way. So I'm mostly focused on just the event that I have next. So, when the Olympics come, I'm sure they'll be there. But I don't really care.
Cool. Where can people find you?
I'm pretty antisocial, especially digitally. I have an Instagram. It's I think it's Vic Wild, so VICWILD, and yeah, that's about it. People want to find me. If anybody wants something, they can hit me up on that.
Really cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Vic, thanks a lot for your time.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot for having me, and I hope this works out all right for you.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Cool.